what we can do is choose an exercise where the strength curve and the resistance curve are in line with each other, and that would be a hip thrust. Who does hip thrust here? Well, hey! Okay, so the hip thrust is universally the most popular glute building exercise, and for very good reason. So it's going to be harder to demonstrate a hip thrust. So what I might do is get you to demonstrate a floor bridge, which is basically a poor man's hip thrust, poor woman's hip thrust. Okay, so if you just do a few reps, let's look at the biomechanics of the floor bridge or the hip thrust. For those of you that don't know, the difference between the two is that a floor bridge is done on the, and a hip thrust is done on a bench or a box. The main difference is you get a better range of motion when you do a hip thrust, because obviously Amy's only got about 10 inches of movement there with the barbell. If you're doing a hip thrust, you're probably going to get 12 to 16 inches of movement. And like I said, range of motion is key when you're looking at hypertrophy. So you want to stimulate the full contractile length. Please stay on the floor. Okay, so we started talking about strength curve and like resistance curve. So when the load is placed on the hips, gravity goes straight up and down, which is a linear path, and also the path of the force itself is also pretty much straight up and down. So there we're optimizing the force created by this massive muscle group called glute max. We're not using the hamstrings very much, we're not using the lower back. If you're very good at hip thrusting, and many of you girls will have been coached endlessly on how to hip thrust, and will have seen, like, you know, Lauren Simpson and Hattie Boydell and all these girls that are pro level showing you how to hip thrust. If you're good at hip thrusting, you won't feel it in your lower back, and if you won't feel it too much in your hamstrings. Maybe when you start to get to the end of the set, you might feel your hamstrings kicking in, and that's usually because at the end of your hip thrust, when the glutes start to get tired, it's very normal that another muscle group that's nearby, attached to the glutes, comes the hamstrings. The hamstrings start to kick in, but that's fine. Generally what we're seeing with this versus the deadlift is a much more appropriate loading pattern, because like I said, the force moves in the direction of the resistance. Would you like to say a little bit about your hip thrust routine?
I actually use my hip thrust right at the beginning of my workout. Well, I do my warm-up sets, and then I'll do 4 sets of 10 to 12, and then I will go down and do 6 to 8 reps. I don't really go any lower than that, and that's currently what I'm on to build at the moment.
So that moves us on to not just what is the best exercise for glute training, because I think we agree that hip thrust is one of the best ones. There are lots of other exercises you can train your glutes with. I'm not going to bore you with a list of glute training exercises, because you can go onto Google and get that information. But one thing that might help you understand how you can better build your glutes is to explain a couple of loading parameters. So loading parameters are variables within your workout that you can change to elicit a slightly different training effect and also apply a bit of variety to your training. So we've all been in that situation where we're following a training plan, and maybe your coach has given you a new plan, and you've done, it's a different rep range or it's a fancy exercise, and you get really sore after your workout. We all like that feeling of having DOMS. For many people that doesn't last for very long though, and DOMS starts to go away once your body adapts to that particular exercise or the kind of stimulus that you're applied to. So Amy said that she starts off with sets of 12. So sets of 12 is a very traditional bodybuilding rep range. It's right in the middle of the strength spectrum, so higher intensities at one end, single reps, triples, sets of 5, that's strength training. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we have got the more endurance and the volume stuff, which is very high rep training, you know, 20 reps, 30 reps. All these rep ranges have got value to you as a trainee when you're looking to increase muscle size and strength. And it's important to be able to manipulate the rep range. So this is a loading parameter we will refer to as intensity. So you've all heard the term intensity before. Unfortunately, it gets misused quite a lot in the industry because people refer to things as being intense when they're difficult or tiring. So if I did like a circuit and I was sweating, I'd be like, oh man, that was an intense workout. But actually, intensity in strength training terms refers to only one thing. It's the percentage of your 1 rep max. So it's the force or the load or the weight. So higher intensity is higher weight or more load, lower reps. They're inversely proportional. So, you know, if you guys want to use the term properly, then when you talk about intensity, we're talking about the weight. So high intensity, heavy lifting. Low intensity is endurance training. So when we look at rep range, which is obviously inversely proportional to the intensity, it's the single most important loading parameter that you should vary in your training, because it's the first thing that your muscles will get used to, and then once your muscles get used to that type of stimulus, you're not going to get that many more gains. So you said you start with sets of 12, that's absolutely sound, it's a good rep range to use. What you try and do is change the intensity, change the rep range, maybe after a phase of between 2 and 6 weeks. Certain trainees will get used to a rep range much faster than others. In my experience, a more advanced trainee, someone like this young lady who's obviously done a lot of training, she will get used to the stimulus faster than a beginner because her body adapts very, very quickly. So a very simple loading parameter change is your rep range. So do not get stuck in the trap of doing 3 sets of 10 for everything. Okay, let's change it up. We're either going to go higher or lower on the reps. Now, if it was a female trainee, want to increase the size of their lower body, there's a lot of slow twitch fibers in the quadriceps, for example. Slow twitch fibers would benefit from sort of higher rep training. So I might suggest, if Amy came to me with this conundrum, I might suggest that she moves on to a phase of higher rep training. Now, most people would probably assume that heavier reps, or sorry, heavier weights would be better, because we're all stuck in this mentality that, like, you know, to be big you have to be strong, and they don't always go hand in hand. And there can be a lot of volumization in a muscle group when you have higher rep training. Now, unfortunately, most people doing sets of 20 would just do simply that, a set of 20. They put the bar down and they're done. But actually a set of 20 to achieve hypertrophy should be a very painful and exhausting experience. If you've ever done a set of 20 squats to failure, and I mean failure, the last 5 reps would have been bloody horrible, okay? And so you need to set the weight correctly. We can't associate high rep training with it being easier, in inverted commas. It should still be horrible, okay? If you were to go the other way and go for lower reps, you might go down sets of 5, sets of 6. As a rule of thumb, the higher the rep range, the lower the sets you need to do. The higher the load, the lower the reps, the more sets. So if you'd have done a strength phase, you might have done 5 sets of 5. That's quite a common strength training protocol. But if it was sets of 20, you might only do sets of 2 or 3. You would generally do more exercises where the reps are higher and less sets, and you'd have a boring workout. Doing strength training, you might only have 2 or 3 exercises, 5 sets for each one. That's 15 sets. That's usually enough to stimulate hypertrophy. We'll think about another loading parameter which we can change, and this is something you guys will probably also be familiar with, and that is the time, or specifically the time and attention. Who's heard of time and attention as a training principle? Excellent. So, time and attention is one of the major stimuluses to muscle growth. So, I'll give you a real world example. If you do a set of 10, because that seems to be the popular choice, most people do their reps fairly quickly, and we're all guilty of training sometimes doing our reps too quickly. If I was doing bicep curls, I don't want to demonstrate a hip thrust. Most guys do their bicep curls like this. I'm doing 10. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's about 1 second per rep. So if we do 1 second per rep and we do 10 reps, how many seconds does the set last for? 10. So 10 seconds of time and attention is nowhere near enough to stimulate much in the way of hypertrophy. Certainly, if you're carrying a moderate to a light weight, there's no stimulation to type 2 fibers because the weight's too light, and if you do the reps too quickly, you're not really stimulating your type 1 fibers. Maybe I'm going to backpedal a bit here and talk about fiber types. Are you all aware that there are 2 or 3 different fiber types within the muscles? So in order to really developing a muscle group, you need to be aware that you have a mix of type 1 and type 2 fibers. We also have type 2A and type 2B fibers. So if you think about the cross-section of a muscle, you have a fair amount of both of them. Almost every muscle group has a fair mix of these fiber types. Genetically, you might be predisposed to more type 2 or type 1 fibers. That's a bit of a complicated topic for another talk. But you need to probably stimulate both types of fibers, and that's one of the reasons we vary the intensity, because the higher the intensity and the weight, the more we stimulate type 2 fibers. So this is kind of basic strength training. but it's something that people forget because we get stuck in 3 sets of 10 mode, and you know, we hit a plateau. So imagine you've been doing hip thrusts for a long time, and you've done sets of 5, sets of 10, sets of 20, and you've not seen any more development, and you basically want to find a new way to stimulate. We're going to increase the time under tension. The easiest way to increase time under tension for most people is to do a slow eccentric phase. That's the lowering phase. So once you get to the top of the hip thrust, assuming you've got a heavy weight on you, we can lower on anything from 3 to 5 seconds to create a very long set. So if we went down on the 3 count, 1, 2, 3, and up, 1, 2, 3. If we did that for 10 reps, and it's a 4-second set, how many seconds will we have in the set? 40. 40 seconds is definitely sufficient time under tension to stimulate hypertrophy. You just have to be aware that you will lower the weight very slightly. So you're not going to get the same weight you would normally do for a set of 10, but it is a slightly different stimulus. So as well as changing the intensity in your workout routine, you can also change the time under tension. Okay? And the easiest way to do that is probably to do a slow eccentric. I'm sure you've done a few of these things.
Yeah, I hate them, but I do.
Nobody likes lowering slowly. So if you guys have ever tried it, you'll know it's painful, and if you haven't tried it, give it a go next time you're in the gym. So I want to thank my trainee Amy. She looks fantastic. Thanks for demonstrating. Thank you guys for listening to my talk on glutes.